The latest 2021 release of DDM introduces the option to have two-factor authentication for web users. So this may be for external suppliers where you need another level of security. So let's see how this can be configured. So first of all, this is for DDM Web. So if we have a look under System and Web Client, then in this section down here, we can see the multi-factor authentication. I'll come back to this in a minute. So multi-factor authentication is not set up against the user's individual accounts, it is set up by group. And in my case, I have a supplier group for whom I want to set up the requirement for multi-factor authentication. So if I edit this group, then in here I can select the multi-factor authentication mode, and we have two options. We have either email, so the user will be sent an email with a code, or we can use an authenticator app, either the Google or the Microsoft one. In this case, we're going to use email. And then we have the duration, so the number of days that the multi-factor authentication is valid. And in this case, we're going to set it to 0 so that we can make sure the user has to go through the authentication process. So if we confirm this, this has now been set for this group. If I right click on the group, you'll see there are some other options here. I can do this either against the group or against an individual user. So if I go back to my users, and if we have a look at one of my suppliers, here we can send multi-factor authentication instructions. So that will send an email to the user telling them how they should set up multi-factor authentication. So if I click on this, then the user will receive an email. We can also, against that user, reset their multi-factor authentication. So if the authentication is valid for a few days, we can reset that so it will force them to authenticate next time that they log in. So if we go back to the web client section here, and let's just see what we have here. So this is the unique ID for my installation. We've got email prompts that will get sent in the email. And then we have a grace period, so how long the code that is sent out is valid for. So in this case, for 5 minutes. And then if we're using the authentication apps, then there is a registration code and a QR code here that once the user has installed the app, they will need to enter to register DDM Web with that application. So we've currently got it set up for email. Just before we move on, let's just have a look at the email that's been sent with the instructions. So what we'll be using is email-based authentication, but alternatively, if we have Microsoft authentication, then there's links here to download the app to a mobile device, for example, and one also for the Google Authenticator. And then the QR code or the string that will need to be entered to register with the app. So if I now go to DDM Web, and if we log in as our supplier, then they're now being asked to enter their two-factor authentication security code, and this will be emailed. So the email has been received and looks like this. Here's the authentication code, which I will copy and paste into here. And once that's verified, then the user now has access to the DDM Web. So multi-factor authentication for the DDM Web client introduced in the 2021 release of DDM.